Recording in progress.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Pima Community College Governing Board's October study session. We're really excited to have two great speakers today. We're going to have Dustin Williams, the Superintendent of Schools, followed by our subject matter expert on the Higher Learning Commission and representative actually as well to the Higher Learning Commission, Wendy Wakes. So I will hand it over to the Chancellor to introduce our superintendent at this point. And unfortunately, please excuse me, I'm not able to be there in person, but I'm here on Zoom. So go ahead, Chancellor.
Madam Chair, thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce our County Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dustin Williams. So Dustin and I, we have regular ongoing conversations about the state of K-12 and post-secondary education in Pima County. So as part of that conversation, we thought it'd be great for him to come and interact with the board, share what's going on, because I think you'll find it quite illuminating what's happening in our K-12 system. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you, Dustin.
Thank you so much, Chancellor and members of the board. It's truly honored to be here. I'm more than welcome to share the wisdom that I have from the great county of Pima. I observe a lot of schools. I've been in probably 300 since I got elected in 2016 and re-elected in 2020. Meet often with all sorts of stakeholders, from constituents to superintendents to students. That's really where I see the magic right now happening, is listening to the student voice, especially when you can even get into the elementary schools and listen to the K-5ers. Their perspective on things gives you a real quick snapshot of exactly what they want and what they need. So honored to be here and more than willing to work further on anything that comes from this meeting.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Superintendent, we're really excited to have you. As you know, this is an extremely important relationship between the community college and all of the schools in Pima County. So thank you.
So Dustin's going to talk to us about the trends that are occurring in K-12 education, especially in Pima County. And so there's a number of areas that we'd like to explore with you and then some. So do you want me just to do it as a Q&A kind of approach? Is that easier? Okay. So Dustin, one of the hot topics you and I have been talking about is the whole concept of the learning loss because of the pandemic. Can you share a little more of that with the board?
So the pandemic has caused, obviously, hardship with families, loved ones that were lost, and the change of every outcome that we could have ever managed and never been planned for. We do know one thing is that students are massively resilient, and when you get them back on track and you start presenting them back with lessons and good education and innovation, they're like sponges and they take it back in. But there's a time and a place to when that kind of that magic moment starts to happen. And you can see that we came out of the pandemic last year. Some schools were hybrid, some schools were in person, some schools were still closed. At this moment now, this is the very beginning of our first, what we would like to feel as a normal year. And what you're seeing across the board are the very beginning stages of the learning loss. And a lot of that is just due to the factors of everything that the pandemic brought. A lot of these students had very social, emotional, traumatic events that happened. They lost parents and they lost loved ones in their families and loved ones that were friends of the family. And anytime you have that with adolescents, that creates something that not a lot of people know, not even experts know how to deal with that. And that was something that we had already seen prior to the pandemic, was we were really delving into that social emotional learning with students, and we could see that students were starting to have higher depression rates and suicide rates were creeping up. And so now, coming back into a full year of what we call normalcy, we'll have to see. We do have some grades coming out through a federal test. which is their Arizona Merit Test, or what a lot of people used to call as Ames test. That will give us kind of an idea. We did have a national ranking of ACTs that came out, which were the lowest in 3 decades, which is super concerning at that high school level for students. We really don't like to judge students also on one federal mandated test. I think the other proponent of the learning loss of what we're seeing is the lack of personnel that we have in the classrooms. So number one way to learn with students is to have that champion in the classroom. And when you have a teacher shortage like we have in just the whole state of Arizona, it makes it really hard for students to take those next leaps and those next leaps and bounds. So engagement right now is at its absolute forefront. And how do you engage those students in the way that they're going to be excited and want to learn? And the way to do that is through innovation and relevancy for them. So creating spaces for them that look like what they like, and then getting them interested in career paths that are going to support them to go right back into the trades. And so that's kind of what we're starting to look at.
So,
So I just have a quick follow-up question. So I mean, I read the large amounts of students sort of are unaccounted for during the pandemic. Do we see them returning back to the classroom? They just didn't attend online, virtual options. I mean, there was just large declines in enrollment through the K-12. Did we experience that in Pima County? And are we seeing a recovery? Do we still see students who are missing? And if so, do we have any idea where they went?
So we go from kind of the learning loss to delve into the enrollment and the enrollment losses, and what do we see for enrollment, which they go hand in hand. If you're going to learn, you got to be at school. And what we saw were 2 things. You kind of saw the real younger age, maybe that 5 years old going into kinder, and during the height of the pandemic, parents kind of saying, I don't know, I'm going to hold off. And during that time, not a lot of parents know that by law, your child has to be enrolled in either homeschool, private school, a charter school, or district school. But when you've got a pandemic and you've got people that are literally perishing in front of you, a lot of parents just kind of got on the sidelines and waited. We also saw kind of that junior, senior year student that kind of phased out. It wasn't really their type of way of learning, which is that remote learning or online. And even the hybrid is tough. Even the statistics alone for mastery in remote learning is very, very low. Not a lot of people can do it really, really well, as you can, the trials and errors with technology. So what we are really looking at is the numbers now. And what we see is kind of a flat line that has gone across the districts and across the whole educational spectrum. You have a very interesting law that was passed, which was a universal voucher expansion. Now, if you wanted to see if homeschoolers were going to come back into the district schools, I think that will probably cause that direction to go the opposite way, which will now have more people staying in the homeschool arena, and now they'll be having a minimum of $7,000 per child to do it, which will be resources for them to go look at. Arizona is a choice state, so we're really going to have to see what the voucher expansion did as far as bringing numbers back in. One other thing, Mr. Klinko, is we look at the birth rate of today's children, and we know that number has been declining. And if you look across the board at kinders, it raises the superintendent's eyebrows. They kind of go, ooh, this is the first time I'm really starting to see kinder levels, not drastically low, but enough to bring up the conversation as you just asked. So enrollment for all entities, I think, is going to be flatlined going forward, and you're going to see a lot of people really focused on what is the best and brightest opportunity for me and my child, and where am I going to go? What can they provide to me that's going to be a different option than somewhere else?
Dustin, you hit on a lot of key themes just a moment ago, so let me take you back to the point you were making about relevancy and technology. Could you say more about that? Because what you shared with me seems to hint at the world has changed significantly for the K-12, and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah, this new generation of learner, and it's the entire spectrum, K through 12 right now, is a very, very fast-paced learner. They are very much into things that are relevant to them. If you went to school 10 years ago and you walked around elementary schools and you said, hey, what do you want to be? A lot of students would come and say, hey, I want to be a professional basketball player or professional football player. Well, you go into schools now, and it's I'm going to be a professional YouTuber, TikToker, or gamer, and they know right away that I can write code if I go get my coding degree. So the technology landscape for them is where they live. They don't live in a time where innovation was limited. Matter of fact, they're looking for things that are like them and what they like to do. One of the platforms we're starting to look at through a company is bringing in after-school clubs. And these after-school clubs are all around PlayStation console, computers, and it is after school. But this is the club. But what doubles down on these clubs, these are now becoming degrees. So the games that they play are what the future of everything that's happening. So something that you'll see for the relevancy for them is if you go to campuses that have maker spaces, or what's now called Z spaces, or a Z space would be something like that, which is a maker space, but it's technology. Students will actually learn how to dissect a frog using 3D hands and 3D goggles. And you go in there, for my first time putting these on, it's new, and I think I'm kind of technology savvy. You watch how they just jump into this stuff, and there's no fear, because that's just kind of the element they're in. And then you go into the trades, and you can see you've got two big markets that you see. You have innovation with every type of trade. So today's construction isn't the hammer and nail. Now there's a lot of mathematics and a lot of technology that's involved, even down to welding and everything that you're doing. Anytime you can add that layer to a student's opportunity for education, you're just going to get a much bigger buy-in, and you're going to get a much, much bigger success rate for that student to graduate and to just fare off to do better overall across the board.
Dustin, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Kat.
You can hear me?
Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, no, thank you. Everything that you're hitting on is really important to us. We need to hear all of it. We recently had some professional development with the board, and we heard Arthur Levine and Scott Van Pelt, two notable authors and experts in the field of higher education, and they wrote this book called The Great Upheaval. And everything that you said really validates that, which is students are learning differently. They're learning at different paces, and what they need is a lot different. And we have to get out of that mindset of standardized testing that had been around since, the 1940s. One of the things that I wanted to ask, and I guess this is sort of a rhetorical thing, but dual enrollment tripled over the last 3 years in spite of the downturn in enrollment during the pandemic. What do you, Dustin, attribute that to?
That's going to be another layer of innovation. So when we talk about innovation, it's always not just bringing in new technology. It's also being innovative on the amount of time that you have with a person and how many opportunities you can give that individual. So you might be innovative in a way to say, not only do you take this language class or math class or science class, but how about if I double down and you take the same class, we do it dual enrollment, and you get both credit. So now what parents have caught on to is not so much the technology piece, but the cost of living piece. And they really, really are looking for those answers. So I think dual enrollment, you're seeing, is finally catching on. I think it took a while for parents to kind of understand, oh, wow, wait, I can actually almost have a student completely completed with gen ed courses, with basically 1-2 years advanced. And many parents know from past experiences what their college life was like and said, boy, if I could have gone back and just done this a little bit differently. Plus, you have the students captured for this short time. And again, with the numbers kind of flatlining, I think you want to expose them to as much opportunity as you possibly can. And I think dual enrollment should be almost a requirement across the state. It would be neat. You're doing two things. One, you're letting the opportunity be open to the student at a whole new level. And then the other part to that is you're saving the family a lot of money. And inflation, we could have never thought of what it is, but even beyond inflation, the cost of everything is hard. It's really hard to do that. And if I can get a leg up for my son or daughter and maybe freshman through senior year, dual enrollment definitely would be something that I would be interested in.
Thank you, Dustin. I want to ask about equal opportunity in some of the less advantaged school districts and schools. Do you see the same level of engagement with students who come from parents who work 2 jobs, et cetera? I mean, how do we level the playing field across from South Side to all the way to Catalina?
That's a really big question, right? And that's kind of the magic mark, is how do we kind of work with equity? I mean, one thing you have to understand is that when a mom or a dad or a single mom or a single father is running a household, homework is hard. School books are difficult. Even if we have Title I funds or we have different opportunities for funding, does the student have the ability to take the class or the time to put into some of the classes that are needed? I think the vision and a shared vision of maximum exposure. For instance, I'm just going to use a district like, I'll use Sunnyside District. You've got the manufacturing industry that you've put in there, and that to me is, I think that's where you're really seeing where the equity starts to get balanced. Is we're not going to forget about certain areas of town that might need that innovation and need that help. I think going back onto the voucher experience, I think is going to cause another equity barrier, even though it was sold that it was an opportunity for students to get this next opportunity. I think it's going to be very, very hard in the private school arena for equity. You're going to see that schools have tuition of $10,000, but if you're only receiving $7,000, how is the student that is, a family that's poor, how are they going to pay for that difference? Now, there could be an opportunity going forward for a homeschool family that might want to get into dual enrollment that didn't have an opportunity to do that through Pima Community College or some other attribute. So that could improve equity on that sense. Now that they are receiving dollars that are going to education, which is completely fine, if there could be a way that they could have an opportunity to take a technology class or a class at Pima through a dual enrollment with a homeschool community that maybe couldn't afford it prior, I think you'd be bridging a gap of equity in that way. As far as the statistics go of parents in lower socioeconomic areas, I would have to do a deeper dive as to how many are actually in the dual enrollment programs compared to other zip codes and areas to give you a really confident number. But that would be a really good thing to investigate, and I would work with you in my office to get that answer for you.
Just a follow-up, if I may. I had the privilege for joining this board to be on San Miguel's board, which is the exception to everything you just said. It's stunning that 99% of those kids go to college or some type of secondary education. But my experience was it's not scalable. It's such a fabulous experience. And putting that work effort in there with their schoolwork, and these kids just thrive on that. But is there any thought at the Pima school district level to think about, is that even workable or scalable at other public schools?
I think when you get into the internship relevancy of it, definitely, as far as the amount of investment from corporations and private entities in certain areas, I think it would be a major challenge. One thing where equity plays a little difference is, there's booster clubs, and there's fundraising efforts, and there's scholarship programs. And so when we know we're located in an area where the socioeconomic is depressed, or there is just frankly not a lot of money, those types of programs are very challenged. Versus if you go to a different area of town that has a much higher socioeconomic population, you can afford full-on football fields and fundraising efforts that can send a whole class to maybe a different part of the state. Those fundraising nights get into thousands, and if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in donors. But if you go to a different area of town, it's very, very limited to do that, and that's where your equity challenge is going to be.
So following up on that, we've had some real success with our Vail early college program, and where a cohort of Vail students are completing their senior year on our campus in our classrooms, and there's really no way to differentiate them from our students. And it was just the success before the pandemic, but there really was an investment from the districts required because of the coordinators on their side. And I wonder if there's opportunities to really take that model and find ways to ramp that up. I mean, it's dual enrollment in even a more dynamic adulting sort of way, because you really have students who are then not just getting this credit, but they're continuing on. I mean, that's what we saw is the persistence, and the success is just so tremendous. And how can we, with you, partner to really engage the other districts to really ramp that up? And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
I think the first
before you go, and before you answer that, after you answer that question, I just noticed that Board Member Garcia's had her hand up for a while as well. Thank you.
I think if you've got a model that's working, you have a copycat model, and that's the most important thing. I think also, just to kind of teeter off that, if you could have students from that model speak to the other students at the school, and if you could invite the parents, but if you can get the student really excited about what I'm doing, when they hear it from a peer, everything changes. There's two voices that are the most important voice for anything that you're doing, whether it's superintendent, schools, marketing, private business. Two voices. The most important voice is a student's voice. It is the strongest voice, and it turns the most heads. The next is a parent. So if you have a model that is really, really working, and you have a district that you've targeted and you want to work with, I think it's really important to have the students be your number one advocate and voice of the program that they are currently doing and why they are doing it. And those students you'll see that are doing it typically are really savvy. They're already kind of thinking a year ahead that, hey, well, I want to get this done and out of my way. That's another part of the relevancy of this new generation. They are so quick to move and to think. And so what they want to do is try to get from A to B as fast as they possibly can. The days of waiting 4 or 5 years to graduate with a full degree, that doesn't excite these types of new generations. Same as also the workforce that they're going into. So if you can parlay those two things to show here's what it is, and then if the parents can see, wait, this is the actual bottom line that I'm saving. The other part, though, is the equity part. So if you have students in one area, you want to look, even, the price at the lowest level or the most inexpensive way you can still think about it is still really, really hard for some families no matter what, and that's got to be taken into account of.
Well, Superintendent Hoffman, one of the things that that I have observed, okay, I know that San Miguel is wonderful, and I know that Vail District has done a wonderful job, because I'd like people to consider that their economic level is higher. People that are sending their kids to San Miguel, unless they're on a scholarship. But when you're talking about the west side and the south side of Tucson, even with the vouchers, you mentioned that they may not be able to afford the additional money. Well, it's not even just that. It also includes the fact that, first of all, the parents normally have jobs that they can't take off from, so they have to take their kids, and they may not have transportation. That's number one. I myself am quite aware. At Mission View, you have families, 5 families together, rotating, sleeping outside in a sleeping bag throughout the year, because this is how they have to pay for their housing. That means that those kids, and I'm talking about elementary school, that means when these kids go in, they don't even have the resources to do their homework, and they're way behind. Understandably, they need more services. So my question to you, what can you do, or we do, to close that gap, that equity gap that they have? These are the same kids that are going to be on drugs. These are the same people that are going to be on assistance. In order for our society to strive and do better and bring those levels up, we need to start in the elementary school, and therefore it continues on through high school. So, I don't have the answer. I don't know that you guys do either. Maybe the State Department we can try to get more funds. Maybe, even at the college level, we have mentors that go into the elementary school. It's not enough to just be out there and try to bring them in. We got to do more. My idea of equal education is that I've always said this from the very beginning, is that education, the quality of education should be the same. It doesn't matter what side of town you live on. But that's not the case, because we don't have the money. The funds aren't there for those, for those schools. So with that, I'm done. So thank you.
Ms. Garcia, I definitely heard everything that you said, and that resonates a lot. As the county school superintendent, we're charged with doing the elections for the governing board members, but also for the bonds and the overrides. And we can see a clear trend of which districts have a stronger chance of getting a bond and an override passed. And I am convinced that a lot of it is because of what you're talking about, the social or the socioeconomic, the amount of, if you go for an override and you have to raise the homeowner's bill, let's say it's going to be $20 or however much it might be a month, that is That can be the cost of a bill. That could make or break some of these families. So when we look at bonds and overrides in certain districts, it's challenging. I can remember having many conversations with, at the time, Superintendent Steve Holmes from Sunnyside, and we looked at the demographics and we looked at the numbers, and it was really, really hard because the state, unfortunately, does not give us the extra dollars. Matter of fact, we're next to last in the nation for per pupil funding. And it makes it really, really hard for these schools to maintain opportunities. I think there's a couple things I want to say from your remarks. I think Pima Community College has possibly, it could be a big opportunity for you to be in some of these districts or areas that might have low socioeconomic families. These are families that are poor. I do know one thing. I run the schools that are adjudicated, which means the schools that are in the juvenile detention center and the jail, and then we also run a diploma recovery program, and we get to work with a demographic that not only is very poor, they don't have a lot of money, but boy, they have the hardest life that I've ever heard of. I could never put my in their, I couldn't stand in their shoes, but I can support them. And I think what I hear a lot out of these students that are in kind of this area is the opportunity that they might be the first one that got the education. And that is a resounding tone. And I think if Ms. Garcia, if you could bring that idea as maybe I think listening to your passion for the family that is making ends meet. It's hard to do day to day. And that's everywhere. But boy, if there's an idea that you could partner to say, we understand that, and what we'd like to do is, as long as your son or daughter is taking this class in his or her freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, what if it did open up the gate, or it did spark the light to say, you may be able to get this certificate, or you may be able to get this degree, or some education that could change the dynamic for that entire family. So I think that's kind of the driving force I would take, because really, I wish the state were to come through, but we have seen, time and time again, year and year after, we are 47th, 48th, 49th, and 50th in public ed funding. And that's just not a hope I've learned, at least in my observation and as being elected, that I can bank on. But if you could come and say to an area, not only do you have to just take the class normally, but we're going to provide you this opportunity, and then we do reach out to some of the community and say, what do we need to get it done? How do we develop a scholarship, or who can come in and help for 300-400 students that might not need the whole tuition paid, but maybe we can ask for a quarter. If there's a will, there's a way at the end of the day. I always believe that.
Okay. Well, thank
Justin,
you.
I think you really hit that on the head, because having your support and you providing some of the nuances on the how, because we all agree. I think Board Member Hay and Board Member Klinko's comments and Board Member Garcia, they all three were basically saying the same thing. How can we replicate? How can we make education more equitable across the board? This is what the board as a whole has been working on, to the point where we have a community. We just started a committee for outreach and enrollment, but having your inputs and your ideas on how to implement these ideas, because they have to go hand in hand with all of the scholarships and grant programs we're doing, because like you said, we can't count on the state bringing that funding back. We're going to keep lobbying for it. We're going to hope for it, But if that doesn't happen, all the creative ideas like dual enrollment and outreach and grant and scholarships really have to happen. But one of the things that I wanted, that we would love your input on the nuances is with this committee that's being stood up actually this Friday is the community outreach piece of it, because I feel that a lot of the students and their parents might not even know that they know we exist, but they might not know all of the opportunities and all the grant scholarship opportunities or even the dual enrollment opportunities that might be available to them, even if it's in the certificate programs. So I think this is something that, and I know you talk to the chancellor a lot, so we really look forward to partnering with you on again, providing the nuanced ideas on the actual, no kidding, actionable way forward.
Yeah, we all know that spreading a message takes 1, 2, 9, 12 times. I mean, and your messaging is also being, it's very competitive out there. And unfortunately, there's a very unpleasant negative connotation that's across our nation with mainly into politics. And what happens is a lot of the good stuff gets drowned out. And so when the good stuff gets drowned out, then everyone's kind of missing the opportunity. But I think definitely partnering with our office, we can share on social media, we can, something simple, marketing campaigns, whatever, any way that we can help, we'd be more than happy to help.
Oh, that's great.
So Dustin, going back along the same vein, right, but maybe hitting two strands of it. One was, your reference to relevancy and technology, but we talked about the micro pathways model. Is that something that we could take into the high schools and maybe help to close some of those equity gaps by giving folks something of value very early on?
I just would have to know a little bit more. So are these the micro paths? Yeah, I think that to me, these students are primed and ready to do stuff. They want to go do stuff quickly. Again, the idea for a lot of the students to go and get into a long-term career you're going to be in there for years, that's really just not the way that this generation talks. So if there's an opportunity where the college could come in and show some of these juniors and seniors that are getting ready to exit out, I think a pathway that might be an opportunity would be really beneficial. Would it be for everyone? No. But would it maybe be for a small majority or a majority? It could be. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that when we spoke earlier, you talked about how with all this advanced technology, a lot of the districts aren't going to be able to afford to equip their facilities, et cetera, with that learning capability. So we talked about how Pima might help to close some of those gaps. Could you say more about that and about the need to do more with the high schools, especially on the partnership side?
Yeah, I think definitely you're seeing families that are gravitating to kind of different areas of Pima County. When you're seeing that, you're seeing campuses that are built differently. So you can go into campuses now that don't have brick walls in part of the room. They're all glass, and it's all open spaces, and students can travel from one area to the next. But that's also unfortunate for some areas that don't have that. So, for instance, if you go to one campus that has maker spaces, well, if a school doesn't have a maker space, that might be the opportunity for Pima Community College to come in and say, well, come look at our maker space and let's partner together so you can get the opportunity to see that. That's also a win for the school, and I mean the school district. A lot of these school districts that don't have some of these opportunities don't have, quite honestly, the money it takes to put in a proper makerspace. So if Pima Community College could show or partner with a school to bring them into a facility in some sort of manner, and vice versa, maybe come see them to show them some of this technology, that would be a huge win for those populations. That would be a massive win.
But with that, and that's a great idea, but Ms. Garcia mentioned also the transportation issues. So Damien, how do the kids in Vail get to Pima? They drive themselves?
Chancellor Lambert?
I think it's a combination where, yes, some are able to transport themselves. Others, I believe the district helps facilitate that transportation. But I think it's also, it is a challenge.
But that's something that districts could do?
Yes, but I envision where, for example, if you take our automotive space as an example, it's not being used all day long. So maybe we could partner with Sunnyside or with TUSD and figure out a time slot where they have the transportation means to bus the kids out in a set time, get them that exposure. They can handle the didactics back at the school district, and we just bring them in for the hands-on portions, so at least they get that exposure. So I think there's ways we can get creative. Right. I'm willing to be creative as long as they're willing to be creative.
I think another
We
thing
have time
is...
for a couple more questions. Ms. Garcia, Board Member Garcia, and then Morgan Phillips has his hand up as well. Go ahead, Board Member Garcia.
I thought I had lowered my hand.
Okay, that's
Okay,
fine. Go
right.
ahead, Morgan,
Thank
then.
you.
I was just going to mention some extra information related to what the Chancellor just said. The Vail students have the opportunity to go to their nearest public school and then have transportation from there to East Campus and back. Some of the students, especially if they're doing extracurricular activities at their school, choose to do that particular option because then they come back and go to band practice or athletics practice or something like that. We've also been in conversation with other school districts, particularly for the automotive program, for potentially having students come to the campus for a portion of the day with transportation being provided for them and then back to their school.
I'm going to go ahead and double down too here. Let me just add a couple things. I think it's really important. There's a very important question next to housing. That's what goes in my mind all the time with equity is housing and transportation. I think for what the opportunities that you have, which is unique, is you're spread out over Pima County in pretty vastly. And what I think strategically thinking about, if we're going to be in zip code 85719, and we know we're close to, I believe that would be closest might be downtown campus, then what we want to think about is targeting the area in there that might have the equity barriers that are going to be the biggest bang for the buck. So whatever opportunity Pima Community College has, and you're going to partner with that particular district or that particular school or other schools. Remember, we've got 150,000 K-12ers running around here, and those are district, charter, private, and homeschoolers. So targeting that area and saying, this is what we want to market for. We don't want to market for the entire landscape of Pima Community College, because we might not have what exactly we want to do there, and we definitely will never get the kid to come 10 miles. It's got to be about within 5 miles. And I think we can get really creative. I think you get, if you can make the radius for what you're trying to offer, I think that would be a way to think about who to approach.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Any other comments or questions from the board or Chancellor?
Dustin, anything you think you would like to share with us that we didn't ask you about?
No, I think we covered a good amount of information. Like I said, I am more than willing to come again or to meet at another time to kind of go off more specific of the questions that we kind of targeted. And again, just really honored to be here with your faculty and board and with your community online. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you
Appreciate your time.
so much, Dustin. Yeah, we look forward to continuing, open dialogue with you, especially as we stand up this new committee and we brainstorm ideas. A lot of them are centered around having not town halls, but roundtables and forums with your counselors in all the school districts, the people that are on the ground that really know what's happening. So we'll keep you informed and just keep those channels open. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. And Chancellor Lambert, I would just say, I think, my big takeaway from this is, again, this idea of innovation and how do we create, through these strategic partnerships, true opportunities for reaching equity. And I think everything has to be on the table in this space. And as we start to really look at how do we reach not only the kids who have had these losses during the pandemic, but who have fallen off of the radar, when you talk about the juniors and seniors who just fell away from programs, how do we get them back into the systems? And maybe we even look at how we set up partial high schools, or how do we use the institution to really begin to move the needle in a more strategic way. And I, again, look forward to the discussion. But I think my takeaway is that I think this, from what I heard, that's what the board really is looking for, is that type of strategic innovation to fill the gap.
And I think this new educational voucher system is going to open up challenges for the K-12 system, but is also going to open up opportunity. And so I think I'd like for us to think about how we can leverage the opportunity and then partner with the K-12, the public K-12 system as much as we can based on that. I don't think, Dustin and I talked about this, he didn't see an immediate impact to the districts, but long-term there could be serious consequences from this voucher program. But I think we're in a position to work together to mitigate or even thrive off of this.
Again, thanks so much, Dustin, and thanks to everybody. I don't know if everyone needs a break or not, but we can go on to our next topic. Sorry, I can't really see what's happening live in concert.
We're just making the
break.
switch. Wendy Weeks is on her way up to the table, and Dustin Williams is just saying goodbye.
Okay, we'll take a couple minutes break.
Wendy, you just let us know when you're ready. Oh, Kat, are we?
I'll take the opportunity
Okay.
myself then.
So with Kat stepped away, we'll just, I guess, reconvene in 3 to 4 minutes.
Hey, Kat, the boys will be back in a minute. There they are.
What's that?
Said the boys are on their way back.
Okay, great, thanks.
Are you ready for us, Madam Chair?
Yes, we're all ready. Are we ready
Okay.
there?
Yes. You want me to go ahead and get us started?
Thank you. Yes, please do. We look forward to hearing from Wendy.
Well, thank you all for coming together to put a special focus on the recent decision of the HLC. And so I've asked Wendy Weeks as our HLC liaison to help facilitate a conversation with the board on the first part of building towards a plan of action that will help demonstrate with evidence our compliance with especially 2C of the criterion, which relates directly to the work of the board. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Wendy.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you for having me here tonight. And this I find a lot of fun. Thank you for making me part of the team. So since we need to get together a plan for Criterion 2C to address our monitoring report, what I would like to do tonight is do a round-robin format where I get feedback from each of you, undivided attention on what you think would work for us to produce action items and evidence. So tonight, we need to have a draft of action items and evidence ready to go because we only have 10 months to get the plan together, implement our plan, evaluate our plan midway, make adjustments, and get the monitoring report written. That is incredibly fast. And not only that, we have holidays coming up. So I would like to get a plan in place tonight. This means it's going to be a lot of work. And in this round robin, we have approximately 2 to 3 minutes apiece for each of the items that we need to address. So with that 2 minutes, we have each board member, and we also have the executive leadership team. Executive leadership team, you also have approximately 2.5 to 3 minutes, and I know there's a lot of you there. So if somebody has ideas for action items or evidence, we're going to ask you to submit additional items by Friday at 5 p.m. to Andrea. So if there's something you don't get to bring up tonight, if you could please email Andrea by 5 p.m. on Friday, we will capture it there. All of the input is valued tonight. We're not going to debate the merits of the suggestions and ideas at this point in time. Okay, so taking a look at the document, I think the document's going to be put up. Thanks, Andrea. All right, on the document, it talks about what Criterion 2 is, and I won't read that to you. I know you've all seen it, and it reads what the core component 2C is. And the first thing it talks about is items it recommends that we address. Those are recommended items. We're going to look at items in a little bit that they didn't necessarily recommend. Thank you, Andrea. So the first one here is board members using resources provided by the institution in preparation of the meeting. So in this round robin, I'm going to go ahead and call on people. And you have approximately 2.5 minutes. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Councillor Sylvan here, if we hit 2.5 minutes, could you just give them a chance to wrap up their final thoughts? With that, I would like to hear what you would like to use as evidence Evidence is a piece of material that we're going to turn over to the HLC. It can be all kinds of things. Sometimes it'll be minutes. Sometimes it could be a video. Sometimes it could be an article that was written. In my office in particular, a lot of times it's data and analysis of the data. So evidence can be a lot of things. But in order to hand over the evidence, we have to have an action item that goes with it. I sent an example out yesterday. So part of this brainstorming today is by hearing everybody else, hopefully we'll all have other ideas. So with this first one, I would like to start with Chair Ripley. Chair Ripley, what do you have for ideas for evidence and the action that would go with it?
Okay, so I'm a little confused by this this document. So are you specifically asking for board members using resources provided by the institution in preparation of the meeting? Are you talking about the monthly board meetings?
So that could be monthly board meetings. It could be anything else you come up with. So,
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, because I have a general, because other than the board meetings, we do need to brainstorm more ideas, because for the board meetings, we have the docs that are in board docs, and the meetings are in public, and they're videoed, they're live streamed. So there is an actual video piece of evidence that's available, at all times. And everything is done in public. Everything is, pretty much transparent in terms of the meeting itself. And the board documents are also online. But what I wanted to propose is an action item that would also go hand in hand with evidence, is the board taking one of these months in the next year to brainstorm and provide individually or collectively ideas and put together an actual, no kidding, onboarding handbook, and I'm talking a bound handbook for new board members, but something that once you are onboarded, it is required to review annually, and we can document that annual review. But in that onboarding document would be very extensive. It would have links to videos. It would have attendance at certain trainings and certain professional development opportunities, but it would also include a checklist, which would involve, giving, perhaps, we would brainstorm it, you have a month to meet with all these key people, one-on-one meetings with every dean, one meetings with, and it would be the only opportunity to do a one board member meeting with, say, the faculty senate. Just, hey, here I am, and now you just have me. You've got my attention, because we can't do that normally. We can't just have one board member meet with the whole faculty senate. So it would be a handbook, if you will, that would form the foundation, and it would define precisely your roles and responsibilities, all of the bylaws, all of the policies, pretty much everything, the wire diagram of the school. All of those things were, I got those things and they were given to me sort of piecemeal, and it was great. But I think it would help to, as far as evidence and action, to really, no kidding, show and prove and help us improve the board, not just our responsibilities, but our relationship with each other, and a relationship with the chancellor and with the college and community and all constituencies. And then there would be no question. It would be very transparent, but it would also be documented, and everybody could see it, and there would be no question on what we're responsible for.
Chair Ripley,
that's one idea.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I had an order set out, but I'm going to change my order. Board Member Garcia, I was just going to go to the people on Zoom first. Board Member Garcia, please.
Oops, wait a minute. Okay, I'm unmuted. You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm not really clear on what you're asking for. I mean, you're asking for evidence. So I guess in reading the statement, it says providing evidence that documents the use of any not document on the document of the PCC can use. I mean, so this is in preparation for our meetings. We already do that. We read the material. I think Kat Ripley's suggestion about a document, you know, a booklet is okay. You know, I think maybe we would include is the new systems that they continue to implement as far as the website. Some of us are not that good at using them, you know, to collect data. And as far as meeting with different individuals, I don't think that's afforded to us. We have to ask permission from the chancellor to do that.
Thank you, Board Member Garcia. Is there anything else you would like to add? I think you have a little bit of time left.
Well, I had requested in the bylaw meetings that they give us a summary of meetings with that the chair and the chancellor would have, but that was shot down. So I guess that's not, should be discussing that. I'm done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is Board Member Gonzalez here tonight?
I don't know. I don't know if you knew there was a
Is
meeting.
Board Member Gonzalez?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Could you go next, please? I'm going to do the people on Zoom to keep my own head straight. I'm sorry.
I'm here. Hello?
Yes, please. You can go, sir.
Okay, in reference to, I'm not too clear in reference to what we want, but one of the things that was mentioned before, and we can provide time and over again in reference to not only communication, but also the rotation. That's one of the things that I really would love to see in reference to rotation for any board member to go to any of the sites and meet with the people that are presented prior to the meeting as well too. I think that's one of the aspects or one of the components that I really would like to reinforce and do the following year. I think there's a lot of information, but as we all know, we cannot have all that information. But I think in reference to rotating us board members to the different facilities or different campuses, I think that would be an ideal, or even having an office at different campuses as well too. Because right now we don't have anything. I think that's one area that we all need to look at. For example, in the Northwest, in the East Campus, Vista, downtown, and even the West Campus, I think the evidence that I'm moving towards is that to establish something in reference to, for us to be on site when we can. As you all know, it's a volunteer position, but I think when we are able, I think it'd be great to let the faculty, students, and staff to come or set a schedule for all of us to rotate on the different campuses as well too. I think that's one area that we need to look at. I know that I've been trying since day one, trying to have board meetings within the different campuses, but I don't think that's going to be it's not realistic. But if for us to be at different campuses, maybe that's one option. I really would like to see that.
Thank you, Board Member Gonzalez. I appreciate that. Okay, moving on. Board Member Klinko, please.
Thank you so much, Ms. Weeks. I think for this item, having watched the video and reviewed the materials that you sent in preparation for this meeting, which I think is part of the issue is making sure that everyone actually follows through with all of the directions. I think one thing we could do is create a evidence log that includes DocuSigns that shows that you completed each of the items, or some sort of template that shows as you're reading through the material, you just check it with your initials. That would be evidence that we've reviewed the materials. Another example would be that each of the board members meet with the chancellor for a pre-meeting, either as a two or one, that you can review the agenda and have early or initial questions answered. That was a practice that occurred for many, many years, and it's not in practice now because of some of the dynamics that have gone on within our board. I think another opportunity generally, and this is, so those are my two primary recommendations. I think the third thing that we really could do is perhaps bring in the Association of Governing Boards to really conduct an audit of our board. In reviewing all of the material that you sent, I actually think we produce sufficient evidence currently to demonstrate all of these areas, but I think there are misunderstandings or a disagreement within our board about how to interpret some of the primary ways that evidence could be collected, or that we're actually following the standards. So I think conducting an audit maybe of the last 3 years and really looking at all of these different components of what's happened on our board, and then having this independent opportunity for self-reflection as a broader tool could really be useful, that we could lay on top, not just for the focus visit report, but I think moving into the regular accreditation.
Thank you, Board Member Klinko. Board Member Hay, please.
Thank you. You know, it's an interesting question. It's, you know, for those of us in the classroom, how do you know when your students haven't done their homework? It's like, well, you ask them. But the first one is a little bit harder, I think, in terms of evidence. I think one clear evidence may be just to confirm receipt of documents somehow. And I think you can easily do that in an email. If they open the email, that's a confirmation of receipt without too much work for the staff. Now, confirming reading the documents is a whole nother, it's a little bit more difficult. So I think circumstantial or corroborating evidence may come into play there in terms of how often board members ask questions that are clearly answered in the documents that are presented before the board meeting. But that's hard to track, and I don't want to have staff members sitting in the audience keeping score either. So that's, anyway, I'll go with my option number one, and if you think of something better for the other two, I'm sure you'll let us know.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to the executive leadership team. Your input as well. Please keep in mind there's a lot of you on here, and you also have approximately 2.5 minutes. So if you have an idea, please send it in by Friday at 5 p.m. But I really would like to hear from at least somebody on the executive leadership team for ideas.
So, Wendy, I know some folks have shared ideas with me, so I will share some of them. One would be that the board members by Friday prior to the upcoming board meeting would submit all of their questions they have about the board, because you actually get the packet before even Friday. So any questions you have about it, you would ask by the close of business Friday. So that's one thing. Another thing is you cannot pull a consent agenda item unless you give the reasons for pulling the item and give us the opportunity to share with you the response, and then based on that determine if you think it still should be moved to the action category. So that's you can easily evidence that. That board members sign an affidavit of some sort indicating that they've read the board materials and have that affidavit submitted on the day of the board meeting. So those are some 3 or 4 concrete ideas.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I think we have about a minute left. If anybody else on the executive leadership team, you probably have about a minute left.
If I may, so following up the chancellor, I think if we had a certain time where any board members then that had follow-up questions prior to the meeting, that those of us who are presenting, we submit an executive summary, and that we would be available to answer all of those questions prior to the board meeting. And then we would have minutes of those meetings.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Duray. All right, we're going to move on to the next bullet, and giving people a heads up here. I'm going to go in a different order this time. I'm going to go with the people who are here live first, and then I will move to the Zoom board members. The next one is we need evidence and an action item for processes to ensure transparency of decision-making at the board and senior leadership levels. I'm going to start with Board Member Klinko, please.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Weeks. So I think we do have a huge amount of transparency in terms of the board's process. It is live streamed. We're watching it right now. It's recorded, it's logged online. We implemented the board docs tool as a way of really being able to track decisions of the board. I think another tool that we've used over time, but I don't believe that we're doing it, is actually we could create a transcription of every board meeting, and then we could post that online so people could do a word search. Sometimes it's a little difficult, when the board meeting is 5 hours, to find the section or the time stamp. So this would allow people to be able to quickly find those types of parts of the conversation. That's my recommendation.
Thank you. Board Member Hay, please.
Yeah, I think that by definition, every decision the board makes is transparent because we do it in public. I would suggest that the transparency at the senior leadership levels, because it's not dictated by law that it'd be done in public, is a little bit more interesting and maybe more equally as important. And so I would suggest, especially on the big topics that include tuition or raises or compensation, those big topics, that the senior leadership document every time they meet with campus groups, be that faculty, staff, or students, and that be put in some kind of minute, or maybe in the board meeting, it's documented in the minutes that the senior leadership met with these groups on these dates, on these topics.
Thank you so much. Oh, okay, I'm going to move to the Zoom board members.
Before you do this week, can I add one additional item?
Yes, please.
So, this is just something that sort of came up recently, but this idea that, our board is a public body, so we have an executive session where where issues are discussed that specifically relate to certain aspects of Arizona State statute. That does not apply to other entities within the institution. And so it has come to my attention that, for example, our faculty senate use a executive session as part of their tool. So I think having an opportunity to make sure that all of our senior levels, including something like faculty senate, are actually in compliance with best practices, so that ideas or decisions aren't hidden behind the veil of a executive session when there really isn't one under statute.
Thank you so much.
So if I could offer a friendly amendment to Dr. Hayes' suggestion, we were talking about this, perhaps for significant items that go to the board packet, maybe we have a form or a flow chart of some type that shows kind of the input and decision-making process that could be included with the board report. So it's not just that the documentation would be available, but it would actually be part of the publicly open materials. Then board members could ask questions about that, but in any case, at least people would have a general sense of what happened and the timing and who was involved.
Okay, let's go to the Zoom team. Chair Ripley, please.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Sullivan stole my thunder. I was going to suggest, you can tell I'm former military, I want a handbook and I want flow charts and I want wire diagrams, but I think a flow chart of some type that because I think the issue at hand is we have these board meetings and it's very fast paced, and we vote on action items and nobody really can see. We have to all trust that all of these things have been in place. So I think flowcharts would help, and especially when the senior leadership provides us with their PowerPoints and their background, we can know that they also did their due diligence through that flow chart, and they included, in the spirit of shared governance, talking to the student or faculty senates and all of the appropriate departments, so that we know all of those items have been checked. I think that would help a lot.
Thank you, Chair Ripley. Board Member Garcia, please.
Okay, so I think all the ideas presented so far have been are very good. But I think, for me anyway, I would like to see that if we document what transpired at the senior leadership level, and if we had a question, that prior to the board meeting, we could ask those questions so we don't have to bring them out in public. And then if it needs to be addressed in public, then it will. But I think that just being able to talk to them, you know, on why they made that decision, or, you know, I think that would be good.
Thank you, Board Member Garcia. Board Member Gonzalez, please.
As Ms. Garcia mentioned, there is a lot of positive thoughts out there. And in reference to the transparency, and pretty much it is very transparent, but also I think that transparency comes with us or other board members to ask those clarification questions in reference to what's being presented as well too. But I always said, and will continue to say, that the more information you provide the board, I think it's the best as well too. I'm not just saying that when we make the decision, we have the 100% information. Sometimes we have questions. We bring it up in executive, and it's not totally clarified. But I think it's something that we need to work on. And I don't blame myself. I don't blame the five of us. But I think, as been done before, we need to work a unit. But also we need to also be equitable in reference to the information that we want to have, and not losing the fact and the point that we're here to do the best we can for the students and the community and the public as well too. With that, one main thing is in transparency. We have some transparency, but not all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member.
Wendy, I just want to reiterate, because this is good. I love this brainstorming, because what the last two board members said was precisely what Lee, the Chancellor, provided, which was provide all the documents, maybe provide more documents, but by Friday, if you do have any questions, if you're unsure, if you are confused, by Friday, ask the question, and the Chancellor will be bound to reaching out to the leadership team or the appropriate department to get those answers. And that would be like the Friday before the next Wednesday's meeting. So this is good. This is good that we all agree on that.
Thank you, Chair Ripley. Executive leadership team, I'm sorry, Councillor Sylvan used up all your time. I'm joking. Provost Duran-Serra, please.
Thank you, Wendy. Hope you can hear me okay. So I think mine is more of a comment, and that is, I think there has to be a common understanding on what transparency means to the board and what it means to executive leadership. So if everybody has that common understanding, defining it and understanding it, and what are the expectations that go with transparency. So that's one example. So going back to the previous one about how we can help prepare board members, actually that's my question. How can we, the executive leadership team, better prepare you with the information we share with you? So we have executive summaries, we have other tools and resources such as data, metrics, KPIs. So if all of us provide the necessary tools for you and what you need, so if you could let us know ahead of time, or just in general, what are the types of things that you're looking for? So when we do submit presentations, slides, or executive summaries, we make sure that we check that list and make sure that we have all of those pieces that you need to be well informed for the board meetings. So those were my 2 comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Duran-Cerda. Dr. B, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I would reinforce what Dolores said. So one of the things in the board meetings is that when we submit the board reports, it has the contact information for us. I am always happy to provide information if there's detailed questions from board members. If the board member asks those detailed questions and they want it to be stated in public at the meeting because there's some concern behind the scenes, that's actually really helpful from our standpoint. If we know what those questions might be, we can prepare a really good answer. So, and that's why our contact information is at the bottom. The one thing I think that may help also with the board reports is that we could add a little section. Oftentimes embedded in the board reports are comments that we met with this group or that group or student government. And we could potentially have a section that actually talks about that, or what groups have been, who we've met with prior to the recommendation going forward or something like that. I think that we could look at that as a board report structure change. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. B. Board Member Garcia?
Well, you know what? I guess I don't want to disparage anyone, but I think that part of it, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, because my screen went out. Okay, so, but part of the problem, as I have stated before, is trust. Feeling that the information that we're being provided is accurate and is complete. Then there's no hidden agenda. And during my time on the board, my observations have been that some of the senior leadership is coached into presenting certain aspects so that we're not aware of everything that's going on. So with that being said, if we want to move forward in a transparent manner, then everyone needs to come forward and really try to work with us and be honest.
Thank you, Board Member Garcia. Okay. Yes, Board Member Klinko.
Thank you, Ms. Weeks. I would just push back a little bit and sort of on the comment that was just made, but also answer the question that Provost Duran-Cerda asked. I actually think we get an overwhelming amount of material that not only details the decision, how the decision was arrived at, a summary of the executive summary of all of the information, presentation. It's usually based on, it's not the first time the majority of these items are coming to the board. So we've already had a study session. We've had opportunities to ask extensive questions. But I think that the material, the way it's presented, is satisfactory. I actually think this idea that Dr. B has presented on a shared governance section that really outlines the process and all the stakeholder meetings could be helpful, because we often hear as board members that there hasn't been opportunities for participation from other groups within the college, and this would help provide clarity to us on exactly what's happened. So it would just, and of course, not every item has these types of issues, but the ones that do, it would be nice, I think, to have that included. But I have found that the administration and the senior leadership and everyone who has come and presented to the board has been factual, has been fair, has been genuine, and have really helped guide the board in being able to make informed decisions. And I found it very trustworthy. And I have actually found it to be the opposite of sort of the way it was presented earlier. So again,
Thank you, Board Member Klinko. Okay. We do need to move on to the next item, or we are going to run out of time. The next bullet is continue to use board training to help all members of the board understand their role, responsibilities, and governance. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Zoom group, and I will start with Chair Ripley. Please, do you have suggestions for evidence and action on that item?
I think the continue to use board training is the operative word, is because we do a lot. We do it monthly. We do board training, but I think we need to focus on and document specific training that's that hones in on roles, responsibilities, and governance. I refer back to the onboarding, but a lot of it's a 6-year term, so some if you onboarded 5 years ago, 4 years ago, you'll need a refresher, perhaps a refresher of that. But what we probably don't do is document, because I personally have taken a lot of online courses through the ACCT, HLC, AGB, so many other organizations I've taken online on my own, and I've read on my own, but it's not documented anywhere. So maybe we need to start documenting it. So we're doing it. Some of us are doing it. We need to all do more, and we need to somehow document it in some type of fashion, somewhere in a collective space on our, I'm not sure how to do that. Andrea could do it, but somehow get a collective documentation, piece of evidence where we can prove that.
Thank you, Chair Ripley, and I have ideas on how to help with that, and I'm working with Andrea, so we will get back to you. Thank you. Board Member Garcia, please.
Well, I think we're already doing all the training we possibly can do. There's all kinds of opportunities. There's a lot of reading material that is given to us, online. The Chronicles of Higher Education is a constant thing, the AGB reports that come out. So I don't know, I guess, just ask questions if you don't understand.
Thank you, Board Member Garcia. Board Member Gonzalez, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The continual board training, I think we are doing it. In reference to the role, responsibility, and governance, I think we have some difficulties in that. I believe in reference to not only the communication or participation, but more important, in reference to respect. I think that's one thing that we all need to look at, really follow. If we want to do the business we can, we need to respect each other. I think that's one of the areas that I strongly feel that has lacks. Some people have the liberty, but I think we need to really come back to that. And as I mentioned a while ago, the operative word for me is respect. And I said it before, and I'll continue to say that. And I've said it so many times at our retreat. I think that's one of the areas that we all need to work on. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Gonzalez. Okay, coming to the room here, and I'm going to reverse it. Board Member Hay, please.
Yeah, so I think we, one ways we already do it, but I think we can memorialize it, is our annual retreat. We spend half a day on board responsibilities and duties, and we can document the board showing up and what the curriculum was for that half day. And I think that's a good way to do it. We've been doing that, and I think we can continue to do that.
Thank you. Board Member Klinko, please.
So I think one of the things that we could do is we could ask Chancellor Lambert to create a calendar with opportunities for additional training for individual members, and we can adopt that calendar with those training opportunities. AGB offers online online portal with tools. We're all members, but that there are multiple sessions that can be watched on, and you can test yourself on board roles, responsibilities, and best governance practices. I think on that theme, I think there are a number of other online opportunities that individual board members could take advantage of if they were presented, and we could provide evidence that it was completed through those platforms. And then, of course, I think individual board members could write essays or provide content or explanations on what exactly the roles of the board's role, responsibility, and governance is, because there really seems to be, I think, as our provost noted earlier, there seems to be a misunderstanding or misalignment between board members on exactly how some of these things are defined. And so I think despite multiple years of trying to come up with a common definition, we haven't achieved that. And these are tools that could help us to do that.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move to the executive. Oh,
Wendy?
yes, board member
I just have
Garcia,
a
please.
quick comment here. Okay, one of the things that, and this is just food for thought, one of the things that I find the most frustrating is the fact that decisions are made by the chair or the vice chair, and this is before Chairperson Ripley was elected, is that decisions are made and yet not communicated to the board. And I'm not trying to put anybody down. I'm just saying that when you hire attorneys and don't give us any input on it, just go and do it. Or you decide to have brought the AGB in for a board training, those kind of things, I mean, or even replies to the HLC. And the entire board is not included. On one hand, I'm being told, you're a board, you should work together. But then on the other hand, is the chairman's role or the vice chairman's role that they speak for the entire board without letting us know what they're going to do? I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just telling you my observations.
So
just
Board
think
Member
about that.
Garcia,
That's
since we're really just in a brainstorming session, we're not really trying to comment on each other's input. Just want to note that, because I know we're coming close to our time and we still have one more item to go on this piece. And then we have a discussion on bylaws and complaints. So I just want to make sure we stay on track. Let me just add real quick, Wendy, on the administration piece. I think, clearly defining the categories for board members' professional development. So for example, tying it to their roles and responsibilities, setting policy, fiduciary duty of care, loyalty, obedience, and what it means to hire and fire a CEO. What does it mean to have institutional oversight? What does it mean to develop a strategic plan? So just defining those areas. I think another thing is something that our board chair has said in the past. When board members go to conferences, they should detail out which sessions they went to and key insights they gained from attending those sessions. So those are just some additional input.
Thank you, Chancellor. Executive leadership team, we have about a minute if anybody has a burning desire to chime in on this one.
So just one thought, I'll put the burden on the board members for change. Perhaps each year, each board member should be responsible to conduct a training for their colleagues on a particular topic, because at least from my own experience, right, when you have to teach the best way to learn something is to have to teach it to someone else. So something we could think about is make each board member, they could pick a topic of particular interest to them and be responsible for a training. Well, 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Sylvan. And executive leadership team, Councillor Sylvan did it again. He has used up all your time. Okay, to the last bullet. It's actually not the last bullet. The last bullet provided by the HLC. Executive leadership focus on engaging the community and the Board of Governors in meaningful dialogue to address ongoing challenges and communication strategies. I need the evidence and the action item that goes with it. I forgot where I started last, so I'm starting in the room this time. Board Member Klinko, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weeks. I think perhaps the best opportunity is this format of these study sessions, and I think just very clearly defining how specifically the individual items engage the community and the Board of Governors in that meaningful dialogue in addressing the ongoing challenges, and we can sort of outline what those challenges are, I think, sort of in a summary, so that it's not, that are tied to our mission, and I think also back to our strategic plan, and it could just be a little more detailed out how these action items and these study sessions really connect to all of that, as opposed to just maybe for the public or members of our community. They don't necessarily see the relevance of how it's all tied together, and that might help clarify that.
Thank you. Board Member Hay, please.
Yeah, I think I'm going to tag on to Board Member Gonzalez's idea about at least maybe trying to do some of these study sessions or town halls in the communities where the actions are being taken and where the students actually are. So I think executive leadership and with accompanying board members to go out into the community and have town halls in a meaningful way, at least twice a year, on topics that are important to the community and certainly to the college.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to Zoom. Chair Ripley, please.
Yes, I think I guess I honed in on the word community, and I assumed that meant the community, the public community, not the school community. But either way, I think, again, I'm gonna circle back to the enrollment and community outreach committee that will be kicking off this Friday. I think having some type of way in which we circle back to the executive leadership team to brief them on what we come up with at our monthly meetings in terms of how they can help, and they can maybe even add to our ideas and help us brainstorm on how to conduct better and more outreach with the community in terms of the communication strategies, especially, and all of those challenges we've already talked about reaching the demographics that don't get reached, et cetera. I think executive leadership input would be really important to that enrollment and community outreach committee.
Thank you, Chair Ripley. Board Member Garcia, please.
Well, I think both ideas, Chairperson Ripley's and Gonzalez's ideas should complete it. I don't think we need to add any more.
Thank you. Board Member Gonzalez, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Oh, okay. And those are I like the ideas, and I think those are excellent recommendations. It's of day one. I really, in order to really engage and bring in the community, I think we also need to be available, as mentioned before, be available to be out there visibly as well too. And one of the things that, as I said in the last meeting, I think that it's very imperative that we open up the board meetings. If we want to hear the positives that's going on within Pima Community College and also the negatives, I think they need to come before us as well too. We've been getting, it's unfortunate that COVID has been here for the last 2 years, but I think it's, as we all been seeing out there, it seems like everything's phasing out or laxing out in reference to the opportunity to come back and open the doors for the community. I think that's one area that we really need to look at, as I mentioned the last meeting, that bring the people in so we can meet with them face-to-face, hear with them face-to-face, but more important, especially the students. Those are the students that I think the young people, our future enroll Pima Community College students, I think those are the people, are the kids, the communities that we really want to look at. And one of the things that I've said before and over in reference to the community, the key point that we need to look at is getting the parents engaged of the students. Because I know there's a lot of opportunities out there, but who better yet to not only promote and advocate within the family is the parents. I think that's one of the areas that I've as mentioned before and over again that has to be done. And hopefully with this new community outreach component, we can do that as well too. But I do want to emphasize the the parent engagement, in reference to really not only having a two-person, but make it a tripod, people that will advocate for the young people, the students, from the parents, from the community, also from the college. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Gonzalez. Executive leadership team members, same question, please. Evidence and action items.
So, if I may, Wendy, the executive leadership team, we host numerous town halls already. So we have a pretty good structure in place, and perhaps formalizing a role for the board in those town halls that we have across. Also, our students are engaged. Our student government, in fact, has an upcoming town hall. They engage in a lot of town halls with the students, of which we are part of as well. So I think all of that would be very valuable evidence, particularly if our board members, or at least a designated board member, would be at these various town halls that we have throughout the year.
Thank you, Dr. Dure. Dr. Duran-Serda, please.
Thank you, Wendy. So going back to what County Superintendent Dustin Williams said, and Board Member Gonzalez just mentioned about the parents, I really do think that's part of the definition if we're defining what community means. And we've talked about going into the middle schools, elementary schools, high schools. So if we were to hold a board meeting maybe once a year or twice a year, like Board Member Hayes said, where we're at one of the schools, K through 12 schools, and invite the parents, also perhaps having a meeting or a forum at a tribal community school and the rural community, because they're all part of our students in our community. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have finished. Is there anybody else with a hand up? No, okay. We have finished with the HLC's suggestions for evidence. We now need to move on. What are Pima Community College's ideas for evidence and action for board effectiveness? So what other ideas are out there that Pima Community College does or can do that the HLC didn't recognize? But it's information we have. So I'm going to go back to the Zoom team, and I will start with Chair Ripley. What other examples of board effectiveness do you think we should be using as evidence?
Well, I think there are two things going on here as far as HLC and then eventually accreditation as well is board conduct and board effectiveness. And as far as board effectiveness, I think a lot of the statistics and the data, because you need evidence, you need something tangible. And I think by looking at, the fact that we, haven't let anyone go over the last few years in spite of pandemic, the school has been operating. In fact, our budget is actually pretty flush. The fact that we're opening new centers of excellence to afford the possibility to all demographics to attend state-of-the-art certification programs as well as transfer programs, et cetera. I think all of the data is what we should be using to show that the board has been, in spite of everything else, effective in keeping, not just keeping the doors open and the lights on, but but continually looking to improve enrollment, to improve the quality of the academics that we teach, and to improve our campuses, our facilities, not to mention the safety and the health and the facilities, all of the things, all the moving parts that go into keeping 5 campuses running. I think that's one of them, and a lot of that is evidence in the chancellor's successes and in his evaluation as well.
Thank you, Chair Ripley. Board Member Garcia, please.
Yes, I would like to suggest that to evaluate board effectiveness for our community, that they bring in CFAIR, PCCA, Faculty Senate, and Staff Council to give their perspectives on what the board should focus on. In addition, there's a new group called Pima for PCC. And perhaps in part of the evaluation, for the board that we should have community members, not a whole bunch of them, but certain sections of them, of a group, come in and evaluate what's going on.
Thank you, Board Member Garcia. Board Member Gonzalez, please.
I think reference to the board effectiveness, other examples that I strongly feel, and I've mentioned it before, in reference to several areas, and it comes back to what Mr. Dustin Williams mentioned a while ago, is the equity. I think we really need to be equitable across the board. I know that I sound like in reference to the equity, I think we need to provide all our students equity, reference to the education, but also more important, reference to the opportunities. One in reference to the dual enrollment that I have mentioned before.
You're dead. Can't hear you, Luis.
Sorry,
Okay.
I forgot to say, can you hear me?
No, you're fine. We can hear you now.
Okay. One of the words that I want to mention is that in reference to that Mr. Dustin Williams mentioned a while ago was a reference to equity. I think all the one little example, and I know it's the last time we met yourself, Ms. Garcia, and Lambert and Mr. DeRay in reference to the dual enrollment. I think we need to really look at the equity part in reference to those classes that are being offered. For example, as I mentioned in my memo, for Cholla, Pueblo, Tucson High, and NFI in reference to what classes are available or what's being in reference to those students, the classes that are they can capitalize or utilize in reference to those schools as well too. But it comes back to the equity portion of it. I think it's very important that we all should provide the best that we can for those. And I know that after our discussion, we're going to look at it, and I think we should look at it. I think it's very imperative that those are the numbers that we really need to look at, but also reflect and see where we are actually, the true numbers.
Thank you, Board Member Gonzalez. I appreciate it. We're going to move in-house here to Board Member Hay, please.
So it's interesting, entire dissertations are written on board effectiveness. But there's basic pillars of board effectiveness are information and engagement with your mission and your vision. So those are the basic pillars. And then from that, I think the evidence is the board operations, how well we establish the budget, follow the budget, make sure we have the funds available to run the college as needed, but from the executive leadership tells us what they need, and the goals and the vision for funding and the fiduciary responsibilities. And I think also the outcomes for the other activities can be certainly, I think we've already covered that in a lot of this, but if the pillars of board effectiveness are information and following your mission statement, then those outcomes are listed in, I would certainly in the fiduciary responsibilities, the outcome of the budget, setting of the budget, and then setting the priorities to meet that budget, which means tuition, bonds, et cetera, and then also our decision-making processes that are transparent and open.
Thank you. Board Member Klinko, please.
So each year we produce a board self-assessment and we produce board goals. I think having, Ms. Weeks, I hate to put the burden onto you to present each month, but I think in the interim, I think having a monthly report that gives us an update, both that gives us an opportunity to review those goals and how we're doing on those goals, as well as the work that we're defining now as part of this accreditation, so that we can sort of measure, or at least in a quick snapshot, understand where we are on a month-by-month basis would be really useful. I think having a quarterly in-depth study session until this report is completed where we can continue this dialogue would be very useful in defining and assuring our effectiveness. I also think, just very small things we could do. I think reading the mission at the start of the college's mission at the start of every board meeting is a nice way to remind the college and the board of the purpose of our effectiveness. And finally, the item that I had mentioned at the very beginning, I think we should bring the AGB in for an audit of the board and then use that as a tool to help actualize productive change that we may not be able to self-identify.
Thank you, Board Member Klingo. Executive leadership team, please.
So I will just add, Wendy, adherence to board policy, the bylaws and the board's policies, as well as with state and federal law. And then the other thing I would add is let's do a presentation for the board on what is the college's shared governance model.
Thank you, Chancellor Lambert. Okay, I am going to go ahead and cut it off here because we have less time left than I was hoping for. So with that, I do want to go to the timeline real quick. I'm not going to do everything I had planned on doing, but these are essentially all of the actions we have to do in order to file the monitoring report. There's a lot of steps in here. The evidence file actually has, we have already created that. Andrea has figured that out. Thank you. And she will maintain the evidence file. If you come across documents or you take a training and they send you a certificate for finishing the training or anything like that, please send everything in to Andrea and we will figure out later what's going to be used for the monitoring report. But please remember, if you send in every stitch of evidence you have, we can also use that for our assurance argument in 2024, 2025. So this is going to do double duty for us. Now, tonight was the draft, and we will get this typed up and sent out, but we have to have a time when we're going to finalize this plan that it's going to be voted on. So I don't know what that will look like when we can finalize this plan. So any ideas?
So if I may, Chairwoman Ripley, I think perhaps the best opportunity if you brought if you sent a draft through the Chancellor's office, it could go to the board for comment, and the board could have an opportunity to feed back to the Chancellor, and then a final version could come to the next board meeting in November, and we could just adopt the sort of the comprehensive plan of what the main sort of. And you heard a lot tonight. I imagine not all of it is going to go in. So we'll trust you to sort of provide an edit on what you think is achievable, what makes sense, and what will actually fulfill the recommendations of the requirements of the HLC. And then once we have that, we could adopt it. And then I think the monitoring it quarterly, which it even calls out, is important. But I really think monthly visits from you to our board meetings would be very helpful. So not only are we aware of what the plan is, but we know how we're doing.
Thank you.
I just want to comment. I think that's a great idea. The sooner you get the draft to us, the better. That way, all 5 board members can have an input, and we can tweak it well before the board meeting, the actual board meeting, where we can actually discuss it and adopt it. So I think that would be a great goal.
Thank you. And the last thing I want to bring your attention to, there's a diagram at the bottom. This diagram is one that was used in my office previously, and we call it the Pima model. And I'm not going to go into detail on this, but it has to do with plan, implement, measure, act. What we did tonight was to create our plan. This is our draft plan. when we come up with the final plan, or kind of even before, we need to implement this plan. We have to do what we say we're gonna do. The next one is measure. On the timeline, I have measure as of March 1st, 2023. Measure means we take a look at everything we have already done and we talk about how is it going? Is it working? Do we need to modify anything? And if something's not working, it's actually okay. We just document that. So this is the piece that may be new to a lot of people, and I can talk about it more at another time, but I know my time is more than up. So all I can say is thank you for letting me be of service to you and of the college tonight. I look forward to further teamwork with you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. We really appreciate your professionalism, all your planning, and your organization of all of this and facilitating this for us. This is really important. This is vital for the entire school that the board does this, takes it seriously. And I implore all board members today, I ask you to please come to these meetings with genuine and heartfelt willingness to get this done. Please leave aside any past personal rhetoric or accusations. We have to move forward and we have to make this work, because the only alternative is that we put the school in jeopardy next year during the affirmation process. So let's get to, we need action, we need evidence, and we need to adopt a plan. So thank you, Wendy, for helping us. With that, any other comments, Chancellor or any board members before we, I guess we are out of time.
We still have, Chairwoman Ripley, we still have one more item, and I would recommend that we spend at least 10 minutes just sort of covering it if possible.
That's true. I didn't think we were going to get to that. I turned it over to you, Chancellor.
They changed, it was modified. You have the old agenda. Okay. So let me, Madam Chair, let me just make this brief comment, and then I'm going to have Jeff kind of lead us through that item real briefly for us. So our goal is everyone have their input in by Friday. So probably by the following Friday, we'll have what is a good draft plan that we'll send to you on the Monday, because we'll all be back from ACCT then. And then the goal being it being either adopted in the November board meeting or potentially even earlier. We could set up a telephonic approval and get it even done before the November board meeting. Okay. So Jeff, let me turn over the complaint and bylaw piece over to you.
Thank you, Chancellor. So I'll keep this really brief and hopefully pretty simple. And then if you have questions, please let me know. And of course, we can have follow-up discussion. So there have been complaints. There will be more complaints. That's just the nature of a big, complicated organization. And so I thought it might be worth just mentioning one of the articles to the bylaws that was amended was Article 12, which is the section about response to complaints. And really from a board perspective, unfortunately, it's actually pretty simple. So let me just mention that. And then also, I think there's really also very easy ways for us to document when board members are following this process. So that will be some of the evidence that we can collect to help confirm for HLC that the board is, has not only updated the bylaws, but is following the process. So really, there's only a couple of different categories of complaints. So we've defined complaints in the bylaws as complaints meaning an allegation that there's been a violation of applicable law or accreditation requirement or some kind of ethical standard or published college standard. I'll take a little bit of liberty and say, really, if you have any kind of complaint that fits that or just a general complaint about the college, then board members are supposed to refer that to the chancellor, refer that individual to the chancellor's office, and then also notify the chancellor's office so that we can do follow-up. And really, if you confirm that in an email to the chancellor's office, we have a really easy piece of evidence to demonstrate that that happened. And of course, either through, depending on the nature of it, if particularly if a board member just wants confirmation, yep, it's been dealt with, we can do that both through telephonically, and again, we can follow up with an email, and then we have a document trail from the board member and or the individual who made the complaint, and then back from the chancellor's office or the appropriate area so we can document the complaint was referred and it was resolved in some way. So really easy way for us to establish evidence. If the complaint is about the chancellor, then the referral goes to the board chair and legal counsel. And again, that's an easy way for board members. It's certainly encourage you to pick up the phone, but send an email and we can reciprocate with a confirming email that we got the message, and then we can show through that exchange happened, and then we can certainly document steps of the process and the information exchange. So again, easy way for us to show the track record. If the complaint is related to something about a fellow board member, then that goes to either the chancellor, the board chair, or legal counsel. And then again, what I would say is a really easy, hopefully habit for people to get into is make the phone call. I think that's the best way to have the conversation, but we just follow it up with a confirming email. And again, we have a track record to show that those exchanges happened. And then of course, we'll document whatever the follow-up process is after we talk about the situation with the full board. So it's really fortunately, that's a pretty simple process. The college has more complicated processes internally to deal with different kind of complaints, but really from a board member perspective, I'm happy to come back and talk to the board or bring someone in, talk about it or answer specific questions, but board members don't really need that level of detail. All that's really important, again, if it's a general complaint, refer to the chancellor's office. If it's really about the chancellor or board member, then the chair and legal counsel. And if you remember that and nothing else, we'll be following the bylaws and again, producing that evidence that will help us show that we're following our process for dealing with complaints.
Chair Ripley, Mr. Sullivan, I was wondering if you could just give us some tools and some better understanding. So if we as board members do not follow our process that's outlined now in the bylaws and that's been ratified by the board, and the complaint process isn't followed, the complaints aren't referred to the chancellor with the relevant details, and instead board members engage in the complaint process or engage in communication that's outside of the defined process that you've clearly outlined, what are the remedies that the board should be taking?
So if you allow me for just a second, let me explain why it's a problem why is that a problem when it happens, right? So one is we've set standards, and what HLC wants to know is we could approach things lots of different ways, but once we pick one, we have to follow it and be able to show that we follow it. Otherwise, HLC will say you're not following the accreditation criteria because you set a standard and you didn't follow it. So if we don't follow that, or if the board doesn't follow it, again, whether it's on the administration side or the board side, we will create a problem with our accreditation. If I think I understand your question correctly, if a board member is not following the process and either whoever it is thinks they're aware of the problem, fellow board member, it's the chancellor, whoever, excuse me, then that really qualifies as a complaint about a board member that should get referred to the chancellor, legal counsel, and or the board chair so that we can address it and hopefully resolve it quickly so that we get back on track. Is that what you were getting at?
Yes, and then what will the board then do?
So then we're going to follow the process outlined in the bylaws, which try and start with an informal conversation, right? Hey, there appears to be a disconnect. Let's see if we can understand what the issue is and figure it out and get back on track. If an informal process doesn't, in other words, a conversation doesn't resolve that, then there's sort of a escalating level of actions the board could take, right, in a series of corrective steps, if you will, that goes anywhere from publicly raising the issue, so at least there's been public disclosure, and the majority of the board, if they think the conduct has been inappropriate, can make that known on the record so the board is protecting the integrity of its processes. There are other remedies in the bylaws, like you could strip someone of their committee assignment. We could put restrictions on what kind of training they're allowed to take. So there are other types of steps like that if it came to that.
So just so I am clear, so it's really not about retribution or going after anybody, but if a complaint is brought forward, the board has a responsibility to follow the process, and as you've outlined, first maybe talk about it, and if it continues, then escalate it because that's what our rules say we have to do. And if we don't do that, then we would be out of compliance with the HLC criteria for holding ourselves accountable to our rules.
Right. So there's that piece, which is the college and really the board is responsible to make sure that the board is following the rules it set so that we can demonstrate we're in compliance with HLC criteria, because if the board adopts standards and doesn't follow them, we're going to have a problem and not be able to satisfy criterion 2, which will result in some kind of corrective action by HLC, which can range anywhere from monitoring up to some really serious sanctions that threaten the future of the college. The other issue when it comes to complaints and why it's really important that board members follow this process is if someone complains to the board, depending on the nature of the complaint, the college as a legal entity may be on notice essentially of a problem that requires under state or federal law some kind of investigation and corrective action. And if the college doesn't do that, it puts the college in significant jeopardy of being responsible for harm to someone and potentially economic damages. So it's part of why the timely, and this is not just for board members, this is for everyone, the timely reporting of complaints is essential if the college is going to be able to take an appropriate investigation, find out what's going on, and when necessary, take corrective action, which sometimes may be a legally required responsibility. So timely reporting of complaints essential to protect the well-being of the college and the individuals involved, because of course if someone is being subjected to some improper conduct or action, we want to know about it and stop it and or fix it.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a comment too. So just to be clear too, this is, if we don't follow these processes and our own policy, we're not just putting the school at jeopardy, but we could also be, it could be harmful to the person who possibly was subject to some type of unfairness or whatever the complaint was about. And as a board, it goes back to board's roles, responsibilities. We are not the subject matter experts here. We're not HR, we're not ODR. So it protects everybody to include the complainers. So we really need to follow this process. Thank you.
So Jeff, I have another sort of related question that's related to the complaints. So complaints, as we read in the paper this past week, were brought forward from certain employee groups that didn't go through a process and instead they went directly to the Higher Learning Commission. So could you just outline in a standard way how, because we've received some verbal communication around it, but I'm not aware of the board having received a formal written complaint in any way specifically related to these. So what is the proper process for an employee or employee groups who have concerns that the college isn't following its accreditation process? I mean, there is a series of steps. I mean, beyond filing a grievance with the Higher Learning Commission. I mean, you can first come to the board and talk about it. And could you talk a little bit about what that process really should look like so that the board has an opportunity to self-correct or address those issues internally?
So normally, it's not normal for employees to go to the board first, right? Because the board is a policy-making body. It's not responsible for day-to-day operations, and board members are not supposed to go investigate individual complaints. And as has been noted, they're not subject matter experts, and you are volunteers, and an appropriate investigation of a complaint is a time-consuming activity that requires knowledge of the subject matter so that you can actually do an appropriate investigation and reach an appropriate conclusion. So there are a number of processes at the college. So in which process a complaint belongs in depends on the nature of the process, but really we've tried to keep that a little simpler at Pima. So if someone has a complaint and they don't know where to go, you go to the Office of Dispute Resolution, you submit your complaint, you have a conversation with the people there, and they will triage it and move the complaint into the right process by connecting that person with who's ever responsible for that particular area. And part of the reason for that is we don't expect anyone to be an expert and know, oh, well, this is a personnel complaint, or this is a financial fraud, or this is whatever it is. It doesn't matter. If they don't know where to go, like I said, there are processes for lots of these there's information available on the website, on the complaint page, in APs. But to keep it simple, the bottom line would be if anyone really has a complaint or concern, if you contact the Office of Dispute Resolution, they will determine what the most appropriate process is and link that person into that process.
And so could you just, I mean, I'm sorry to belabor this, but in the particular case of this past week where there were 2 complaints, what would be the, I mean, there is an internal process to evaluate when this level of complaint is articulated. And by circumventing that, it not only doesn't create the opportunity for due process, but it also puts it into a very different process that can take months or years to even get to a resolution of some sort that doesn't actually seem to fix the problem. It just outlines, because at the end of the day, the Higher Learning Commission, they don't adjudicate. They just provide decisions like the one that was received that outline monitoring tools to make sure that we're actually doing the work of reviewing complaints correctly. So could you just explain just a little bit more in detail about what in this particular case is the appropriate action for the institution if and when it comes through the right process, or how will we address a complaint like that or complaints like this in the future?
So let's say this complaint had started in ODR as opposed to where it is now, then there would have been a conversation about what are the right areas of the college to address the issue depending on the accreditation criteria and the particular process in dispute, and then who's the most appropriate area to do some kind of fact-finding. It might be ODR, or perhaps depending on the nature of it, we would bring in someone from external to Pima to do fact-finding. So we're essentially going to run a process like that now in order to make sure, well, 1, that there's not really an issue, and 2, that we can thoroughly document that the college followed its complaint process to make sure that the item was adequately investigated and appropriate assessment and then corrective action, if necessary, was taken.
Okay, so again, just for my, yeah, we're out of time.
So what we can also do, like I said, there are a number of processes. The board you don't need to worry about memorizing the details of all that, right? But if it's of interest, we can certainly have, as a study session topic, a more detailed conversation of it and give some more detailed examples, like this is what happens with a student complaint, this is the process for an employee complaint, et cetera, to give you a better idea. The processes are similar in that they have the same components, but it's usually a different person or area involved because the subject matter expertise is different.
And the only reason I continue to ask is because I just want to be sure that any employees who are watching this, or this could be sent out to employee groups, so that in the future it's very clear of what the process is for these types of complaints, because it is worrisome that the college, instead of having the opportunity to correct them in a thoughtful way and identify whether we do have a problem, instead it's going to this escalated process that actually can potentially damage the institution at its very core rather than actually correct the underlying problem.
So to give you a little bit of assurance about that, Human Resources and the Office of Dispute Resolution are working together on a number of trainings and kind of going around to different areas of the college and all the different governance groups to kind of talk through, here's how the complaint process works and here are your avenues when there are complaints, so that to alleviate any possible confusion about this and make sure people have better awareness.
I mean, and perhaps, Chancellor Lambert, one of the tools we could do is just simply mandate a special training module on complaints for every employee in this institution to complete in the next year, so that there is clarity on how these types of processes should work.
Madam Chair, I think
I have one comment. Yes, I think we're out of time, but I think this is worth another study session to talk about the complaint process. And I think what will be really important is, again, having a flow chart or wire diagram so that all employees understand exactly the steps in the chain of command that needs to be followed. And I think what's really important, in addition to training and getting the word out to all employees, is having supervisors and at all levels, low level, mid level, higher level supervisors do the training, train their people so that they can eyeball to eyeball see the people that they supervise, so they do understand precisely, even if it means at the last resort that employee chooses to skip that chain. But the important part, and this is today's, I think, theme, is all of it has to be documented. That's the most important theme today, is everything needs to be documented and to include the complaint process. Thanks. That's all I had.
Hello? Can you hear me? I just have a comment. I'm sorry. I gotta say, the reason that they went to the HLC is because they don't trust the system. That's what we need to fix.
This is why we're here. This is why we're here. We're trying to fix we're trying to figure out where the gaps are in communication. And I think this is one of them, is making it very clear what the process is and where the flow of communication is possibly breaking down and how we can fix it. And again, having a trail and having it documented, that way the board can have oversight. Because the board can't have oversight if we don't understand what the entire process is and if it's not documented.
I got to tell you though, that they did go to ODR. They did.
Point of order.
follow the
This isn't germane to the details of this particular.
So, right, and we can go into that another time and demonstrate that just because someone makes an allegation does not make it true.
Chairwoman Ripley, I would move that we adjourn the meeting.
Yes, we have gone over. Thank you, everyone, for your
Second.
time. This is really important. Thank you for coming together to learn and get better and to move forward. Thanks, everybody. This study session is now adjourned. Thanks. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you.